humility versus modesty. What's the difference? Does it matter to know the difference? Well, it does matter to know the difference. Modesty was an insight that I gained during my own recovery over the course of 7 years that I realized formed a really fundamental part of moving from emotional disorder or emotional unhealth to emotional health. To know the difference is to understand both things and how they fit into your life, or if they're not in your life, and how you're going to fit them into your life. Modesty, what a beautiful thing. It's recognizing one's true limits and being content to work within the confines of those limits. Some think that's outdated. Some think, well, if I live like that, I'm limiting myself. But notice what I said. I didn't say limit yourself. I said recognize what your true limits are. As a person, if you don't recognize that you just do have limits, man, that's a bad way to live. That's a frustrating, bad way to live. Because just because you don't recognize that a limit exists does not mean that that limit is not there. What if I said, I refuse to acknowledge that I need sleep. I refuse to acknowledge that that limit for me as a person, as a human being, exists. Don't like sleep, I'm just going to pretend like I do, like I am not limited by that. How long do you reckon I could go before that caught up to me? Not very long. I think the longest I ever stayed up was 3 days, or 3 nights. 3 days, 3 nights. And I'm telling you what, at the end of that, and this was in my early 20s or late teens, but at the end of that, I went into a coma. Could not wake up, could not be woke up. After 3 days, my body just said, that's it. Whether you want to sleep or not, you're gonna. And I just went into the deepest sleep of my life. So there's an example where I had a limit. I tried to ignore it. I tried to say, okay, I don't recognize it, but I paid for it. Anybody living like that, anybody who is immodest, will be forced to pay the price for the failure to recognize those limits. Immodest people, if you think about it, they live frustrated, and I should say unnecessarily frustrated, difficult lives. Why? Because they say that limit don't exist, but it does exist. Whether they acknowledge it exists or not, they're still bound by it. You can't work beyond a real limit. So it's still there, they just don't acknowledge it's there. So they're trying everything they can to ignore it, but they're still limited by that, whether they acknowledge the limit or not. What's humility by contrast? Well, I've got an illustration here to help us all capture the point. Humility would be if I said to Michael Jordan, hey, Michael Jordan, let's say I'm walking downtown and I don't know what he's doing in my little town, but he's here, and let's say we pass each other. I say, oh my gosh, you're Michael Jordan. And he says, why, yes, I am. What can I do for you, young man? And I say, listen, Mr. Jordan, I would love to offer you some suggestions about how to play basketball better. Would you mind, could I offer you some suggestions about how to play basketball better? If Michael Jordan stopped, if he just stopped, that would be humility right there. But if he actually said, yeah, all right, I will listen to what you have to say about how basketball could be played better, that would be a huge demonstration of humility. And why is that? I know nothing about basketball. I know nothing. And especially compared to him, it's almost absurd that I would even dare to offer him some suggestions about how to play basketball. Between the two of us, he is the master at basketball. So do you see how humility, not modesty, but humility, is Michael Jordan saying, I pretty much know everything there is to know about basketball, but I am willing to stop and hear what this guy has to say. I demonstrate humility when I say to my daughter, this is what I have in mind for the best way to do a thing, but I'd like to know what you think. She says, oh, Daddy, what I think is this and this and this. And I go, oh, yeah, okay. Take some of those things into consideration. That shows great humility, because I'm the master. She has 6 years of life. I have 46 years of life. So the fact that I'm willing to bend, you think of humility as like stooping, right? That's what it is. You're stooping down to somebody else's level. Modesty, by contrast, would be if somebody offered Michael Jordan a chance to pilot a spaceship to Mars. What do you think, Michael Jordan? Tomorrow, I can hand you the keys to the spaceship, and we would like you to pilot the spaceship to Mars. Will you do it? Well, modesty would be if Michael Jordan said, nah, I don't think so. I don't think. You need to get somebody who knows how to pilot a spaceship, because I don't know anything about that. That's modesty. That is beyond his limits. He has no experience with spaceships that I know of. And for him to just take the keys and say, but you know what? I have no limits. I can do anything I put my mind to and try to fly that spaceship would be very, very immodest, wouldn't it? Modest people get things done and experience more success than immodest people do. When I look at my life and I go, boy, I'm worn out, got too much on my plate this week, and I'm going to burn out. I'm going to burn out if I keep this pace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my schedule on Friday afternoon. Maybe I'm going to skip the last Symptom podcast this week. I'm recognizing beforehand my real limits as a flesh and blood person, and saying, how can I comfortably work within those limits? Not try to go beyond the limit, but work comfortably within the limits. So do you see why modest people, they get things done and they experience more success? So that's the difference. Now, if I asked you, if somebody walks up to you on the street, if Michael Jordan runs up to you on the street and says, hey, tell me what the difference is between humility and modesty, would you be able to explain it now? Orange slices are brief highlights from the last Symptom podcast. Subscribe to full audio episodes of the show on any major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, Amazon Music, and more. While I've got you chewing on that, like this video, pretty please. Might as well press subscribe while you're at it. I bet you a nickel you know somebody who's overdue for hearing some of these things, so go on, forward this video to them.